over the past 4 months, we've gone through a major church transition in response to this quarantine, this COVID-19 quarantine. So every Sunday prior to that, we would gather together in person in our church facility, corporately together, and worship and celebrate and fellowship and a lot of really good things. So then when quarantine came, we didn't gather online like some other churches did, and many people wanted us to, but there was an intentional decision from the elders to not continue to gather corporately online. So Greg, I know we've been talking about this a little bit. Love to hear from you. What was kind of the heart behind that decision to not gather online every week as a church?
Yeah, there's probably there are multiple reasons for that. One of the things is obviously we want to go to that house church model, that smaller church model type of thing. And this is something that helps us along that way. Another thing is with the amount of people that we can, gather together that made more sense. But one of the biggest things I think for me, and I think for probably us, is that watching a service online isn't going to church. That is not the gathering. That's us watching a program on. And so we wanted to really try to protect our people from going there because it's an easier thing to kind of do, to sit home and watch the church service and just and feel like we did church, and it's not church. And so we wanted to be careful to kind of guard against that. So that's why we were trying to do more of the smaller church type of model, more of the getting together. Sometimes it's on Zoom, sometimes it's together, whatever that looks like, but where we are still gathering today as we're able to. So that's what we were trying to avoid. And some of the other elders may have a different viewpoint or some other things to throw in there, but that are some of the big reasons.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on that? Why we chose to not to continue gathering online, but to gather more locally in homes?
Well, the obvious support of the vision that we believe God is wanting us to engage in. I think that was a big factor of it. On another level, and this leads into just basic communication, that we wanted to facilitate understanding and being able to dialogue through things rather than just have somebody, and Greg put it, I thought, really well, of just kind of zooming into or dialing into a program, and we watch a program as a spectator rather than a participant. So that value of wanting people to be involved and be in discussion and considering really the effect of an application of their lives of whatever is being talked about in Scripture. So, and that doesn't mean to say that anybody that didn't gather in smaller groups was doing it wrong or wasn't church. For sure, there's many really good churches that were still live streaming and doing all that stuff, that they're good churches. It's just for us, we believe God is taking us down a different road, and this seems to be facilitating in fact, the increase in the intensity of the pandemic is actually making us even more sure, not that we need that, but making us more sure that we are traveling down the right road. It's a very good thing. And so I just think it's a better form. It's not the only form, but it's definitely a better form. And yeah, I think it's better communication too, but we'll talk about that.
I think it also allows the body to use their giftedness in those smaller churches. And I think that's something that's missing in the corporate gathering on a Sunday. So for me, it's all that. And it's also, I can't, think it's bringing the fathers back into the home to be the leaders of the home and to be leading their kids in that gathering in those smaller homes, which is really, really important. More so now than ever. And maybe we'll get into some of the statistics we've been hearing about and stuff about, fatherless homes and you know, just all those stuff that's going on. It's not good. And this is allowing us to let our fathers, you know, be fathers and use what God designed the family for them to be the headship of the home. And that technically is their first church. And I think sometimes we forget that when we go to corporate worship and we think, you know, the corporate worship is the church. And it is, but it's coming together, but it's really, as people are gathering together, especially in families, you know, smaller units and stuff like that, that's church. And it's allowing the fathers to be the head of the households and lead in that way.
That's really good. So we touched on, you know, decentralizing communication. Skip, you kind of alluded to that. So we know that communication's really important. We want to communicate well. You know, there's many different forms of communication, and we'll touch on some of those. But in general, we've chosen to decentralize communication at West Valley Bible Church. Well, let's talk about what we mean by that. Like, so when we say maybe someone could define what is centralized communication, and then we'll talk about that, and then we'll hone in on what do we mean decentralized. So anyone want to describe what we mean by centralized communication? What does that look like?
Announcement guy.
Announcements.
That's
Yes.
one.
Yeah, it comes from one source.
So one man or woman standing up in front of a large audience, making an announcement to 100, 200, 300 people. So that'd be centralized communication. Maybe email, website announcements. Nothing wrong with those, but those are forms of centralized communication. Skip, how many times were you requested to make an announcement while you were preaching a sermon?
Every week, almost every week. Please say this. Yeah, and it's only reaches a very small part of the actual church body. It's just a very, very small part. But worse than that, it's one-way communication, and without dialogue, it makes it very difficult for understanding.
So you just kind of alluded into the answer of why are we starting or elevating this desire to decentralize communication? Why is that important to us, and how do we want that to start looking?
Well, we're becoming a decentralized church, so obviously communication's got to follow.
Sure.
And I think Skip answered it too. Sort of a one-way communication where there's no dialogue back. It opens up the door for questions and make sure that there is understanding to what is being communicated. Because many times we can communicate from one person, and people are going to hear what they want to hear, and they're not going to have the opportunity to ask questions. Whereas the decentralized communication, there's a much better effort to answer questions that people may have, and to help understanding and shepherding, you know, whatever the communication piece is.
Yeah, totally agree that interaction is huge. You know, we've heard it say, if you want to learn something, you need to teach it or own the information, right? So if I as a leader have to receive information, learn it, and then pass it on, then I better really know and understand it. So Travis, you've come on board to West Valley Bible Church to help with many things, and one of them is the communication plan. So I wanted to ask you, what does the new communication plan look like now at this time, and what do you hope that it accomplishes for us?
Well, that's a good question, Rob. Thanks. I'll say first, I think if I'm doing my job right, most people probably won't even know that I work here. And the good thing is we're all working on this together. We have some very talented people supporting each other and us people like Liz Zielinski, Vanessa Ast, Diana Mogelson. But before answering your specific question about the plan for communication, I'd just like to share something really important from Exodus 18. In Exodus 18, Moses' father-in-law shows up, and he notices what's going on with Moses and the people, and that his communication style is very centralized, and he's basically killing himself. And he shows up and he says, it says, the next day Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, what is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening? And notice the eyes in Moses' response. He says, and Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between the one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. And he said, now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. And you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you. You will be able to endure, and all this people will go to their place and rest. So our plan going forward for communicating is intentionally decentralized, like Jethro's advice to Moses. It'll take some time, some intentionality for us to get there. But right now, our desire is that most communication or communication that we would deem as being like primary, it would start with just a direct conversation between the elders and those leaders they're overseeing. The leaders will then communicate directly with their people and their group in a similar fashion that like Larry mentioned. So there can be a back and forth and a clarification of the information. Only after that, at least for the time being, will we communicate en masse via email or social media. And we think this will really do two things that we also see in Exodus 18. Not only did Jethro's advice facilitate more effective communication, it also fostered an environment where there could be shepherding and discipleship. So that really answers the second part of your question in terms of what do we hope to accomplish. We place a high value on making disciples, on leadership training, on learning to walk by the power of God's Spirit. And we believe communicating this way will put an emphasis on those practices. I know you're familiar with 2 Timothy 2:2, but I think it really captures our desire. When Paul said, and what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And I think that really sums it up.
That's awesome, Travis. Thank you. I think we should acknowledge that then what that means is if you hear something through like a mass email or through social media, it's likely if that's your first time hearing it, you're going to be the last to know, right? That the leadership team and the house churches and the groups that are connected to the elder, they're going to have heard about it first and have a chance to dialogue and work through it. And then we'll just use mass communication to sort of clean up, you fill in any gaps at the end.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point too of why we call it practice. It's not going to be perfect, especially at first. There could be gaps and holes like that at times, but what it'll do is it'll just point out to us that we need to practice a little bit more and get a little bit better. So